Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a quick recent reads video to talk about some of the things that I've recently read. It's already halfway through December and I'm really happy because a few videos ago I talked about how I hadn't been reading a ton, and I think like 6 books halfway through the month is like a good progress. And I want to also check in because I don't know how well I'm going to be able to like update as far as like my current reading throughout the rest of the month. Holidays are going to be super busy for everyone, I would assume, and I think I'm also going to like hang out with my bestie, and he doesn't live here in town, so I'm going to go away for a little bit, so I won't be able to read a ton or do like an end of the month kind of wrap up. I'm still going to plan to do like best and worst of the year and other like end of the year type stuff, but I have to do that before the month ends, before we even get to the holidays. 6 books to talk about. Let's get into it. To be fair, a lot of things that I did read were romance, but that's okay. Progress is progress. Starting with the first thing that I read since my last like reading update, I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a very short, very cozy fantasy romance. We follow a young woman named Theodora, who was cursed by a fae lord or whatever at a very young age. He came to collect on some contract and he was gonna like take her soul. He got interrupted, and Theodora now has like half a soul, and it's very hard for her to feel and express like proper emotions. And it puts her into a lot of funny situations. This does take place in a world where like fae and like magic exists, but it's very low key. So if you're somewhat into fantasy but you're not into like high fantasy or fantasy with like hard like magic rules, if you want something a bit more light, I would definitely recommend this. It's obviously also very heavy on the romance. There's a little bit of a plot towards the end to kind of like spice things up before the book ends, but I liked it. I like the very like quaint like tone this book tried to have. I think it did it very well. Her love interest is like the Lord Sorcerer of England, and he's not a very like nice guy. He's not like evil or anything. He's just very like off-putting, kind of sarcastic, kind of just like a general like dick, but he's not like he's not committing crimes or anything. He just doesn't like being around people. He doesn't have very good manners, which is like perfect for Theodora because she doesn't really care about manners or being proper and stuff. She's pretty shameless because of her condition. So I really like this. I think I gave it like 3.5, maybe 4 stars. But I do like the author's writing and the overall like tone of this book, so I'll probably pick up the other stuff. I know there's like 2 other books in this like universe. I don't think they follow these characters. It kind of ends like in a very like fairy tale happy ending kind of moment. After that, I read Run Run Rabbit by C.M. Nascosta. This is part of her Cambric Creek After Dark universe. C.M. Nascosta is the author who wrote that Morning Glory Milking Farm book, which is very ridiculous, definitely for a specific audience, but I really enjoyed it. This takes place in the same universe, but this series is a bit more darker, a bit more edgier, not necessarily like, she says there's not going to be like a happily ever after for every book, so they're not always technically romances. In this book, we follow a young woman who is, I think, a werewolf, and then she gets this job working at a law firm, and her boss is her love interest. I didn't really like this one. The writing, as always, is like fun for me, and I really enjoy the author's like stories. I did not like the romance. The couple, the actual pairing, were just constantly like, not necessarily at each other's throats, but it was that constant like, yeah, I like you, but I don't like you that much, like, don't get it twisted kind of thing. And that's fine for like the first, warming up to the relationship. Like at some, like, y'all want to act like it's not a big deal. Little, you're like in your 30s and you're lawyers at this like high powered law firm. Like, just be like honest, like, you know what I mean? Sorry if things look different. I took a break to eat, but I'm back. Anyways, I was talking about Run Run Rabbit, which, yes, I did not like it. I think I gave it like 2 stars. The relationship was just very lackluster. When they were starting out, it was very like coy and like, you're hot or whatever, but like, I'm not into you, like, you're kind of like a dick, whatever. But at some point, it's like, grow up a little bit, because you're both old. You're both, well, not old or anything, but they're old enough they're lawyers, they have like a big career. So I don't know, it just wasn't exciting anymore. It was also a little hard to connect to the characters for me because it was told in like time jumps and reverse chronological order. So we first get the first chapter, which was like not great, because I was super lost. But then after the first chapter, it's 5 years ago when they like first met, and then the next chapter is like 4 years ago, and the next chapter is 3 years ago, and then so on and so forth until we roundabout back to the beginning of the book. And I was just like really lost. Like, no, well, not lost, but like I was just like, I don't have a connection to you or your partner or your relationship. But if you like this author's writing like I do, you can probably just get through it fairly well and like not like DNF it or whatever, but it was not the best. After that, I did pick up the third book in a series. I really like the series. The first one I read earlier in the year, and now I'm on book 3. And that is The Librarian and the Orc by Finley Fenn. This is another like fantasy romance. We follow a young woman who is a librarian, but she's not like, she doesn't have a good title or anything. She's kind of just like a helper. She really wants to like become a student, be a scholar, get like a proper title in this library, but she's a woman, she's poor, and someone just gave her pity and like lets her like restock the shelves, but she doesn't actually like do anything like research wise. She reads a lot, but she doesn't have like, she's not of like a proper status or whatever. At this point in the story, orcs have been given some rights in the human world. So she gets an orc visitor, and she, like a lot of people, are like super scared of orcs and like they don't like mix well. She's like has some preconceived notions, blah blah blah. Then something's happened and she gets taken to Orc Mountain, where the other books in this series have taken place. And it's a romance, so you can imagine what happens. I like this one better than the last one. I really love the first book in the series. This one's not as strong. I've been having trouble with like the conflicts in the story. I'm all for like an outside conflict, like humans, you know, being prejudiced against orcs and it becomes like an issue with the relationship. That's fine with me. But a lot of times within the books, the female heroine will almost always be like, I just can't be with him. Why? I just can't. And it's like, you need to give me a reason why you internally are having issues with this relationship. And there's just like a lot of lying. A lot of, I'm not going to be completely honest, on both sides here. And it was just like really frustrating to read, especially since like, I don't think we get his POV? If we did, I don't remember it at all. But it was like a lot of like, we need to be completely honest with each other from here on out. And they're like, yeah, okay, deal. And then they weren't honest. And then they're like, you have to be really honest with me from here on out. And then they weren't honest again. And it's just like frustrating for me. So the conflicts in this wasn't the best, but I do enjoy this author's writing. And I usually don't critique these spicy scenes in a book because that's really like up to you, whether what you like, that's your business. But I think this author does a really good job of like building like sensuality without just like, I immediately looked over at him and I just knew I need to have him right then and there, which is fine if that's what you're into, like bursts of like lust or whatever. But I feel like there's a nice growing mood, I guess, in her writing that I appreciate. I was in the mood for something more thrilling after some of these romances, so I picked up Asylum by Madeleine Roux. I thought this was middle grade, but I think it's just like really young YA. This is like the first in like a horror series. I don't think I'm gonna continue. I gave this one 2 stars. In this book, we follow a young man who's a senior in high school, I believe, a junior or senior, and he goes and enlists in a summer college prep program where he goes to a local, well, not local to him, but he goes to a university or a college, stays there for a couple weeks to like take like AP like study courses so he can prep his resume for college. It's like a prep course you take during the summer. And while he's there, he makes new friends. The dorms that he was supposed to stay in for this program are closed for renovations, and I think they're staying at another dorm that was once part of an asylum, somewhat renovated already, but there's still parts of the asylum that are still like up. It's kind of like a thrilling mystery ghost story type of thing. First and foremost, the characters were not good. This has the, I don't want to call her a manic pixie dream girl because she does have her own problems and her own kind of drama that she has to deal with. That was almost like fully realized, but the way that our main character, his name is like Dan or something, he immediately falls in love with her. we don't know. I don't have a personality for her. I don't know what her personality is. I don't know what anyone's personality is. Like, they're being like, I just know what their interests are. Dan likes history. What's her name? Alex or I forgot her name. She likes art, and their other friend likes mathematics. That's all I know about them and their family drama and their traumas that they have. But other than that, no characterization at all. Nothing to differentiate the characters. So our main character falls in love with this girl like right off the bat. The way that the author describes her makes me think of like those 2000s like male main character rom-coms, you know what I mean, where like he falls in love with like an artsy girl who wears boots and da da da. That's kind of the vibe it was giving me. So by the end of the book, they only really know each other for 4 weeks, and they do consider themselves like really good friends, which sure, maybe you can like create a very good long lasting relationship with people in 4 weeks. I was reading the book and I was like, you guys cannot honestly call yourself friends, because they argue so much about literally everything. I feel like the only time they were actually like having a good time and like being like friendly and like acting like friends was the beginning, when there's relatively like no conflicts, right? Because you're setting up the story. They fought a lot, and I was why do you call each other friends? Like, you guys are always bickering, and you're always just like you're always like creating angst for each other. Like, it's not good relationship wise. Story wise, had very little motivation. I didn't know what like the main question or the main driving point of the story was. At some point it was like, oh, our main character Dan just wants to do a research project on this asylum, so he's like doing, you know, research and whatever. It becomes this ghost story thing, and then someone starts having nightmares, and that becomes the main point of the story. And then it's like, oh, our main female character, she's having family problems, so we have to help her with that. There were just a bunch of plot lines that were given to us, and while one of them could have taken like center stage, none of them felt super important or more important than the other one. Like, I didn't know what the focus was. They are kind of just running along at the same time. It pretty much just felt like super like aimless for the most part. Towards the climax, maybe like, I don't know, 50 to 100 pages before the book ends, they all kind of like smash together, and it's like, oh, here is the climax, here are all the reveals that are coming to us one by one by one. And I don't know, it's just like not well paced. I needed more like a focus. I'm all for like dealing with one of our characters' family trauma, and then the other character, who's one of their characters is adopted, and he's like long lost relatives or are connected to this asylum, and all this stuff. All of that can be happening at the same time, but I just needed more like focus. I don't know how else to say that, but it felt very like scattered, I guess. I thought it ended like on a decent enough note. Obviously there's like hints at like a second book because it's a series, but if I were these kids, I would just be like, I'm no longer going back to this asylum. I'm so glad I made friends with y'all, but I'm not coming back here, because that part of my life over. Don't need to mess with it anymore. I have a good life. I obviously am privileged enough to go to college prep over the summer. I'm good. And I did write like a more like lengthy direct review on this on Goodreads. Like, I don't actually write a ton of Goodreads reviews, but I wrote kind of a better worded one over there if you want to check it out to see what I mean. After that, I did read another C.M. Nascosta book, the author who wrote Run Run Rabbit. I read her short story Krampus collection, which I picked up. One, short stories easier to get through, and two, Krampus. I love Krampus stories, and it's holiday themed. The collection is called There Arose Such a Clatter, Tales from the Naughty List, so you can assume the kind of content that's going to be here. It is very graphic sexually, so if that's not your thing, that's totally fine. It's a short story collection, so you can assume that some stories are going to be better than others. Hopefully, if you pick this up, they're all 5 stars. If not, it's to be expected. I really like the first and the last story because they did connect towards the end. I wanted more characterization from Krampus. Like, I know what his job is. We only really get that again in the first and the last story. I think that's why I like them. You should probably check the content for this. Obviously, it has sexual content, but just like even more specifically what you like reading and what you don't like reading. There's a lot of BDSM stuff here that's not like my cup of tea. I don't like reading that. That's not my favorite type of content. But if you like it, it's there. If you don't, now you know. So I gave it 3 stars. Again, I like this author's writing a lot, even if the content itself is like not super to my liking. And the last book I wanted to quickly touch on, again, this is going to be a quick short video, was The Missing of Clairdelune. This is the second book in the Mirror Visitor series. I really love this series. This is YA, and every time I bring up the series, I mention how, I don't know if it's because of how it was translated or what, but it doesn't read fairly young. There are tropes and such, but I do think that this would be a fine choice if you predominantly read adult and you're very hesitant about picking up certain YA because you think it might be too like young for your taste. I think this one is written, or at least translated, very well. It was originally French. In this series we follow a young girl named Ophelia, and she is from an ark, which is essentially like a piece of the earth that separated from Earth. This takes place in a like fantasy far future Earth, but she lives on an ark called Anima, and everyone in Anima kind of considers themselves as part of the same family. It's not like incestuous or anything. They've all descended from the same family spirit, which is essentially like their deity, but they don't call them gods for a very particular reason. If you read the book, you'll know why. But they're a descendant from this family spirit who is still alive and still exists among Ophelia and her people. Because they're all descended from the same spirit, they all see themselves as part of the same family. A lot of people on where she's from have very similar abilities. She can read the history of objects by touching them. She also has a ability to travel through mirrors. She gets put into a marriage contract that she did not know, like she was not aware of this contract. And she's going to marry a young man from another arc called the Pole, and they have a very different culture to what Ophelia is familiar with it. But on the Pole, even though again everyone is technically descended from the same familial spirit over there as well, they have like different factions, and they are all like vying for political power as much as they can have under their deity. And she's just not, that's not something that she's used to or comfortable with, and they also have their own little unique magic abilities and stuff. What I really like about this book is that the author does not feel the need to like greatly change our main character in order to fit in here. She's obviously a fish out of water, very soft spoken type of woman. It would be much better for her if she wasn't like that in this new world that she's entering, but she's not. As the story goes on, she gets a little bit more of a backbone, but she's not greatly changing herself, and she doesn't suddenly become like super politically savvy or anything like that. Same character, a little bit of growth. But this is a 4-book series. I really enjoy it. I love the world building. I love the lore that's being built here. I also really love when there is a story being told to us, and in the background you have hints about something else that's happened. Kind of like in one of my favorite series, the Seven Realms series by Cinda Williams-Chima, you have the main plot, but in the background you're being told the story of this queen who was kidnapped by this evil sorcerer guy, and that's the story that everyone knows. But as the story goes on, you find out little bits that maybe the history that you were told wasn't exactly true, and you're fixing history almost. And that's kind of what you have here going on. I won't spoil anything, but I really love that in stories, and we get that here. I really love this series. But I think the biggest critique that I could give it as someone who does love it is I think some people might say it's boring or nothing happens. I've said it before, I love a boring book where nothing happens. In my mind, I think the author is always trying to do something, even if it's not the most exciting thing in the world. I still need to read books 3 and 4, so maybe it'll end on a bad note and I won't love the series anymore. But either way, the first 2 books, absolutely loved them. So that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. It's not a ton of books since my little reading slump, but it is something, and I just wanted to fill you in before the year ends, and I don't know when's the next time I'm going to be able to sit down and talk about my recent reads. Feel free to comment down below about anything I've talked about. Tell me about some of your recent reads that you've enjoyed or disliked. I like to hear anything you have to say in the comments down below. I will also link my social medias down below, as well as some more important links. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.